of this session and co-op conversation events in general. So bear with me a second. So many of you will be used to using Teams by now, or online sessions, but those of you, if you're not used to it, don't worry at all. We'll work ourselves through it together, and we'll all be okay as we go through it. As I mentioned, the session will be recorded. While the speakers are speaking, I'll be grateful if you could put your microphones on mute. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat throughout the session, and there'll also be an opportunity to, I'm sure there will be an opportunity where we can provide you to actually ask questions as well. There's a hands up function on Teams, but also when we come to the time for more questions, I'm more than happy to sort of have a look around to see who's got a question who wants to unmic as well at that point. So that's how we'll do that. I'll come on to the introductions of the various speakers in a moment and what we're going to try and achieve in this session. So this is part of a series of co-op conversation events. They've all been taking place this week, but we also will be running many more in the future. And those of you who have attended these before will know we've done many previously, and we'll carry on doing these. So it's just a reminder to keep an eye on our website and our member communications of further co-op conversation events that we'll have coming up. Throughout the session, anybody who uses social media, really would encourage you to try and promote what we're doing here as part of this session via your social media channels and really raise awareness of what it is we're doing here. So we'd really appreciate anyone that's able to do that as we go through. And the final slide is a reminder that on Saturday, the 14th of May, we have our AGM at the Motorcycle Museum near Solihull, 9:45 to 2:30, and hopefully many of you have booked on to attend that. It is a session that's a live in-person session, but also an online option to attend as well. So just a final bit to remind around that. So I'm just going to remove the slides for a second and stop sharing that and come back to see everyone. There we are. So the session we're about to have is entitled Living More Sustainably. And there's two overall aims really this session. One is there are many people, and I think the amount of people who are growing in this field that want to do more to live sustainably. Some people have been wanting to do this for a long time, and actually more people are starting to realise the importance of it, and more people are wanting to sort of live more sustainable lifestyles. But also at the same time as that, there is a broader issue of how we can make the low carbon transition more accessible to more people. How can we enable people to access more products, services and opportunities to live more sustainably? So this session is going to aim to look at those 2 points together. And I'm really pleased that we've got some great expert speakers to help us through that session as well. And we're going to be doing this in the form of a question and answer session. And I'll be the evil person firing the questions at all the speakers, but I promise I'll make the questions nice, hopefully. And we'll also give you a chance to contribute to any questions that pop up that you want to ask the speakers as well, or ask any of us as we go. And feel free, as I mentioned, to use the chat function. So very big, massive thank you to our speakers. We've got Abby Arden, Project Lead at Hubbub, Chris Church, Co-Director of Community Environment Associates, Mark Gallagher, Environmental Sustainability Projects Manager at Aspire, Lizzie Heron, Chief Operating Officer for our Utilities business, and Charlie Adamson, Account Executive at Ecology. So welcome to you all, and really massive thanks for joining us. So I'm going to start with the questions, if it's okay with the speakers. So I'll go to Abby first of all. So Abby from Hubbub. I think it'd be great, first of all, Abby, if you could just tell us all a little bit about Hubbub and what your charity do.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay, just wave if not. So yeah, what is Hubbub? Hubbub is an environmental charity, and we run and create campaigns that run all across the UK. So I've been working with Hubbub for coming up to 4 years, working on delivering our communities and food work primarily. But as you'll kind of come to learn as I go on, Hubbub do a bit of everything. So we try and make it really easy and fun for people to engage in climate action and to make small changes in their life that have a positive impact on the environment. We tend to do this primarily through kind of fun and playful communications, but also through stunts and installations. And the primary aim is to inspire climate action without making people feel bad. So we base our campaigns really on what matters to people. So broadly, this is linked to the homes that we live in, the food we eat, the clothes we wear, and increasingly important, and something we're going to be speaking about today, the communities that we're all part of. And why does this matter? I mean, we know that climate change is a big issue, but I think the key thing for us is some recent polling discovered that 2 out of 3 of us are concerned about climate change, yet only about 1 in 5 know what actions to take. And about a third of people polled were really wanting some clearer guidance. So that's kind of where HubUp come in, because we're all about making it really easy for people to help you make these changes that will also help you save money and live kind of happier and more connected lives. So just going to share a little example of one of our campaigns, because some of you guys might be familiar with it. It's the network of community fridges that we have. So this was one of our first initiatives that we set up when HubUp was founded 8 years ago. We have a network of 280 community fridges now, all across the UK. And they're basically social spaces where anyone can go and donate food or take food. And they're also often places where people can learn new skills and reduce food waste, because food that otherwise would have been thrown away can go to these fridges and be shared. Just to give you a quick sense of scale of it, so I said 280, that equates to saving about 3,150 tons of food from going to waste last year, which is the equivalent of 7.5 million meals worth. So yeah, I've got a few other examples, but I'm sure we'll get to those as we go on.
Thanks, Abby. And just a quick question on the community fridge network. Do they interact with local food bank groups as well? Is there a connection there with the food banks?
Yeah, that's a great question. Often it's like the first thing people ask, how are they different to food banks? Aren't you just explaining a food bank? Well, the thing that we found is food banks they're often getting kind of dried goods or canned items. And also you need to be means tested to use a food bank. So the good thing about fridges is they're completely open to anyone. And also because they've got the fridge and freezer element, you can take fresh produce. So the nutritional value of the food you're getting is generally higher. Hopefully that answers it.
Thanks, Abby. No, that's great. So the next question I've got for you is probably one of the biggest questions I'm going to ask. Probably, you could go anywhere with this one, but I'm going to fire it at you. So as individuals, what could we all be doing now to live more sustainably and live a lower carbon lifestyle? What top tips and hints are there for us as individuals? What could we be doing?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think it's a huge question, but it's also quite an exciting one, because I think, we can make changes to all parts of our life to reduce our carbon impact and have a more positive impact on the environment. So we can kind of start anywhere. And I think that's what HubUp really try and make easy for people, that we could focus on kind of what we're eating, how we get around, buying habits, kind of the homes that we're living in and how sustainable they might be. So yeah, loads of tips. I'll share a link in the chat after this, and that kind of helps divide up some actions that we've got on our website. But just to dive into a couple, I mentioned first about how we move around. So I think it's quite common knowledge that that cars produce carbon and also are quite polluting. So now that the weather's getting better, could we be using our cars, if we have them, a little bit less? Could we look into renting a bike? Quite a few councils have kind of bike share schemes as well that we could look up. And if we are needing to use a car, could we look into possible things like lift sharing or picking up a friend or a neighbour on the way? And then if we're thinking about food, so I gave that example of the community fridges, but as we're cooking multiple times a day, or we're in the kitchen thinking about meal times, this is a great place to try and just make some small swaps and switches. One key thing is taking an everyday item like milk, for example. Could we try give it like an oat milk a go, or a different plant-based milk, just to see what that's like? Or maybe if we're thinking about meat, which is a real hotspot for greenhouse gas emissions, could we try and experiment with having a day a week, let's say, where we're not eating meat, or even going further by making swaps and small changes. So yeah, that's kind of food and travel, but also, as I kind of mentioned before, about our different hubs at Hubbub. You can look at fashion. So the fashion industry is a huge polluter, accounting for approximately, I think it's about 10% of all global carbon emissions. So just thinking a bit about when we are buying items, how can we make sure they're going that little bit further? So thinking about kind of re-wearing, but also repairing and donating items that we no longer want. And then the final thing linked to this that I was going to mention, because I think it's a bit less commonly known, and goes a bit under the radar, which is actually thinking and researching into where our pension is being spent. So you can actually cut 21 times more carbon. You can cut carbon like 21 times more carbon than going veggie or giving up flying or switching to a green energy provider, just by making sure that your pension is green and it isn't being used to kind of fund these carbon intensive industries. So that's a key one, which is kind of not that well known. I definitely did learn about it at school, but it's really worth checking out this group called My Money Matter. And again, I can paste the link in the chat, but that's a great way to start. But yeah, the key thing here is really just making changes that work for you. Everyone's different, and we've all got different lifestyles, different priorities. So going to the Hubbub website, having a look at the range of tips there is a good way to kind of get going and experiment with a few things.
Thanks, Abby. I mean, that is a great range of things as well. I really like that. There's some sort of more straightforward things we can do quite quickly, and yet there's also some quite forward thinking things, especially around the pension side of things, that would take a bit of research, but really important that we're aware of. And I also like the idea of sometimes just trialing something, just say trialing a different product to eat, not necessarily committing to it, but trying it first to see how you get on. And sometimes that does lead to big changes. From final question for now for yourself, from more of a collective point of view as communities, how do you think communities could work more collectively to start making more of a difference in this?
Again, yeah, really good question. Especially because of what I was just talking about, kind of individual changes. If we're thinking about that at community level, the impact is going to be even greater, but also we'll probably meet some people whilst making these changes and have a bit of fun whilst doing it. So yeah, community is a great place to start when thinking about making these switches. And there's so many things you can do. So really what's exciting about the time right now is that we've got more and more sort of sharing schemes, whether it's food sharing with apps like Olio, or tool sharing with organizations such as Library of Things. So similar to a library, this Library of Things has items that you can rent and you can share with your community. One stat which I love is that, but it's also quite shocking, is that the average power drill is used for approximately 13 minutes. So, every household is buying these items, whether it's a lawnmower or a power drill or whatever it might, a ladder even. Just thinking about how we could share those with our community is quite a fun place to start. And as I mentioned as well, the food sharing apps. So linking back to community fridges, is there a fridge that is nearby to you? Could you go there to donate surplus food, pick up food? Often these fridges share more than just food, so it's a really good place to start. And some other things could be kind of looking into like your local gardening group. Maybe they're growing fruit and veggies, and that could help with reducing your kind of carbon footprint of buying items from the supermarket. It also saves you money, and you can meet some people doing it. So yeah, loads of stuff you can do with your community, and we're really lucky, the time that we're speaking right now, there's so many groups, and COVID's definitely sort of accelerated that as well. So I'm sure there's all these groups just waiting to be discovered in your neighborhood.
Great, thanks, Abby. That's Brilliant stuff, really insightful. And if there's time, I might come back to you again at some point during this session. Over to Chris now. Chris Church, thanks for joining us, Chris. Really appreciate it. So Chris is Co-Director of Community Environment Associates. I think the first question for you, Chris, it would be good to us to understand a bit more about the importance of increasing the accessibility to these types of low carbon solutions. It'd be good if you could provide an overview of that.
Yeah, I think one of the problems we have is that a lot of the information is being given out by green groups and low carbon groups, and indeed by local authorities who aren't always necessarily communicating with the people who could most benefit. I think a lot of groups need to think quite carefully about how they get their message out. And we tend to think, I think a lot of groups are quite good at preaching and they're not as good at listening. And a lot of community organizations and people around them in low income communities especially have got some specific problems. And environmental action can often help solve those. A really good example would be fuel prices at the moment. You know, simple actions around saving energy. So we need to learn to speak and learn to work with the organizations that people who are not engaged at the moment may work with and trust. That might be a community association or a faith group, or even the local co-op, or, you know, sports group. There's a few thousand green groups around the country, but there's all networks where people cooperate and trust each other. And those are the ways we can actually maybe get the message out better.
Thanks, Chris. Have you seen the engagement improve at all over recent years on the things you just spoke about? So I completely resonate with what you're saying about the listening and engaging with those groups. Have you seen an improvement in that on that side of things at all?
I think there's been some really good projects that people are sitting down and thinking, how do we actually do this? I mean, down the road in Reading, I'm in Oxford. Down the road in Reading, there's a group called Draft Busters, who really come out of a fairly deep green environmental group, but are now working with people like Citizens Advice Bureau, pensioners groups, offering people really simple advice, quite simply on how to draft proof their houses. And, you know, for £20, because they're buying equipment in bulk, materials, they can help people do their home up for about £20, and they'll save that much money pretty fast if your house is badly. That's a good example. There's another one in Islington on the same field called Shine, where the advisors, if you like, are not just advising people, going to people's houses, not just to talk about saving energy, but are also looking to say, okay, your front door's a bit unsafe, or your stair carpet. And a lot of vulnerable people who are at risk of fuel poverty are often in pretty rundown houses. So giving people that kind of support in the kind of around the issues that worry them. So I think there's issues like that, but we could also look at some bigger stuff. Harrogate may not be a very low income town, but it's about the first place in Britain that's trialing free buses. If you go to Dunkirk on the other side of the channel in France, they made all their main bus routes free. And bus use has gone up by 65% during the week, 125%. Over half the people they surveyed use their cars less. And of course, already a lot of people in Britain get free bus travel because they're over a certain age. So that's funded centrally. If we made buses centrally funded in the same way, we could do an enormous amount to give people better mobility, because the poorest people don't have cars. And we can improve their quality of life while cutting air pollution, while cutting carbon emissions. So there's a lot to be done. And this needs the green groups to work with the wider community groups and with the local authorities. We need better local collaboration to really get the messages out and to be listening to the people who are saying, what's in this for me?
Yeah, I definitely hear that the collaboration point has been a real key one there. And again, from your experience and what you're involved with, are you seeing or involved with any of those sort of collaboration networks? Are they starting to evolve? Are we getting better conversations now between the green groups, local authorities? Is the connection starting to happen, or is there still a gap there?
No, I think it's been happening in occasional places for a good long time. But I'm involved with Oxford Friends of the Earth and the Oxfordshire Climate Network. But I'm also working with Community First Oxford, who are the network of rural community groups and parish councils. That's an interesting group because we're talking about cutting carbon, but one of the things they do is actually supply oil to people whose homes are heated by oil because they're off the gas grid. They've got a whole bunch of challenges. It's all very well for people in cities to say use the bus more, but people in rural places don't see a bus from one week to the next. What are the solutions there? Is it community transport? Because it isn't necessarily just telling people to get on their bike if the nearest town's 12 miles away down a narrow road with heavy trucks coming down it. So I think we are seeing more and more of the community sector, whether it's, we've had sports groups down the road from me really keen to plant trees. There's ways to get people engaged where they are, with the people they talk to, with the people they like to work with. So I think there's an awful lot to be done.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I mean, I've played sport all my life for various sports clubs, and not once was the conversation ever around anything environmental sustainability as I was going through my sporting life. But now I see my kids playing sport, and they actually do start those conversations in their sports clubs. So I've seen that.
We were planting a small woodland of trees in between a rugby pitch and a car park. They said, well, this will be great because it'll stop the balls running away once it's grown, and it, provides a little bit more shelter. And we had, I think, 200 trees, and we thought it was going to take 2 or 3 hours. The kids were coming off the youth football and the youth rugby, and the whole lot were planted in about 45 minutes because there was so much enthusiasm. And talking to people, very few of them knew there were local environmental groups. But because it was where they were, and it was being, advertised to them by the guy who runs. So I think, we need to look at things like that and say, okay, where do people cooperate and how can they do it for a better environment?
Great, thanks, Chris. That's really good. Again, if there's time, I may well come back to you at some point as well. I'll go on to Mark Gallagher now from Aspire. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining us. Aspire Oxford. It'd be great, first of all, Mark, if you could just tell us all briefly a little bit about Aspire for those that aren't familiar with Aspire.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and good evening, everyone. And thanks so much for inviting us into this space. Aspire are an employment charity and social enterprise based in Oxford, originally set up as a vehicle to provide employment opportunities to people experiencing homelessness. We've come quite some way from those kind of early beginnings in 2001. So I joined Aspire in 2014. I was the 15th staff member. We had turnover of around £500,000, supporting people into employment through our own social enterprises. Kind of fast forward to now, we now let and manage our own properties as a housing provider. We're a formal member of the Homeless Pathway. We work in homelessness prevention, as well as that kind of core roots around employment. And so our mission has kind of evolved into one of delivery, and that core kind of how can we support men and women across the county into opportunities, into employment, training, education, which historically was, the premise being that's the route out of kind of poverty and disadvantage and the kind of challenging life experiences that they were presenting to us with. The kind of policy backdrop, particularly through austerity and measures since, has kind of changed that, and so we have now a very kind of complex, multiple complex need client group on kind of one end, and then a kind of range of programs based around housing and homelessness prevention, focused on that. And then the second part of our role is emerged to more of a, I hate kind of jargon, but as a kind of system demonstrator of how things could look. And so supporting, that's based around inclusion. So supporting employers, how can you, recruit and retain staff and take a more inclusive approach to your recruitment? How do you procure? Can you work with social enterprise? Can you work with local cooperatives, small organizations locally? And so how are, that group of core clients that we've always supported, how are they engaged, included locally in the workplace, in society, in housing, in conversations? And that's what's led us to this conversation and to kind of exploring the environmental sustainability issue. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. So why is the issue of access to low carbon transition important to Aspire? What are Aspire doing, and yeah, what's the importance and what's happening with Aspire in that world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and an ongoing one. In that, this isn't our kind of bread and butter as an organization, and so, but it is a really important one, and we're arguing that it should be, and encouraging other kind of charity and community groups, non-environmental groups, to be considering this as well. So yeah, really pleased to kind of answer and speak to this point. So I think Abby spoke really well around the kind of climate concern, needing that to translate into climate action. And I guess in Oxford, we're really feeling that climate concern is very present, and that climate awareness very quickly has gone into climate concern. But kind of what's next? There's a national debate around protest and activism around XR has kind of got the conversation moving in the news a little bit more lately, and particularly around cost of living. It's a bit more present, but the national conversation tends to be around pace, and criticism of goals and activity tends to be around pace, and the pace of change, whether that's fast enough, ambitious enough. What we don't see as much is how inclusive action that's going to be taken is, and how that's landing locally in communities, who's involved in that. And so, the Net Zero Carbon Partnership for Oxford didn't include any civil society groups or community groups, no informal groups, no residents groups. And so I guess, yeah, how can we as a sector be stepping up to offer, the networks to, represent the communities that we're working with in those spaces, acknowledging that a shift in the local economy is coming. Is that going to entrench existing inequalities, or can it be a lever to alleviate some of those and solve them? And so, one pilot that I'm leading a study period now into inclusive community retrofit for Oxfordshire. So we know that domestic properties across the country, really ambitious targets and numbers of properties that need to be retrofit, this decade. Little legislation and kind of timelines on that, and funding as well. But how can we locally get partners together, start to play a role, facilitate some engagement with the key stakeholders to offer a social enterprise opportunity for when that funding and contracting opportunity comes, recruiting local people to be looking at domestic retrofit, particularly in the private rental sector and social housing sector, and with the cost of living crisis and pushing people into fuel poverty and towards and into precarious housing arrangements and homelessness, that becomes a homelessness prevention issue for Aspire. So I guess, yeah, it's acknowledging what is the operating context we're in. The policy landscape is going to change over the next decade, in ways unknown so far. How can we be kind of advocating for an inclusive angle on those?
And I get, and one of the great things with Aspire is I know you're involved in so many different projects and so many different groups. You're very hands-on in the community, and you tend to always know what's going on. I tend to find if we ever need to find out anything that's going on in Oxford, Aspire always seem to know the answer. And you mentioned about the cost of living going up. Are you seeing these issues increasing at the moment? And is there a risk that actually the accessibility could worsen if we're not careful, or do you see hope of this maybe coming together in some of the ways that Chris described?
Yeah, that's an interesting, I mean, in terms of, we're seeing this more and more, in our housing projects, particularly, residents are engaging us around the cost of living, around their bills. What can they do? If there was a locally owned, community wealth building, social enterprise model around retrofit, including at the top end the technical aspects of ground source heat pumps, insulation, the kind of the technical end, but at the lower end, community self-help around what measures can you make, energy efficiency, existing grants, what the existing market can offer, how are you accessing that as private rented tenants or in social housing associations. The able to pay market, particularly in pockets of Oxford, are able to shelter themselves from the cost of living crisis and to retrofit if they can afford that now. How is that offer being expanded to those already feeling the worst effects of what we're facing? So yes, I do see the potential for it increasing and getting worse. As policy decisions are taken nationally and locally, how is that going to impact those communities? And so secondly, how can we as a sector really look beyond our day-to-day and what objectively would be our kind of remit or our area of work, and really view this as a systems approach, in that we are not technical experts. I'm really pleased to be speaking alongside more esteemed colleagues in terms of climate this evening. But what are we bringing to the table? We're representing the groups and the communities that we work with, and including them in the conversation is the aim. So we've been on a journey from beginning this as I'm pleased to say a forward-thinking organisation with some flex in our own funding due to being a social enterprise. The ability to look at our own footprint is how this began, and taking some measures ourselves. We then sought some small grant funding to support other local organisations, informal residents groups, but also other charities and community groups to start thinking about this and implement some measures themselves. Then that led to a pilot with the Housing Association as kind of joint housing managers, looking at how we can engage residents and community members across the county in environmental sustainability to create their own projects on this theme. And that's led to this retrofit study period that we're looking at over the next couple of months. So yeah, I hope that kind of sets out our approach to this. And again, for a very recent kind of newly engaged partner in this space, very open and keen. And it's great to have Chris on the call also, as someone who has sat across more traditional green groups and has been very welcoming in the kind of mutual benefit of groups like ours coming together to solve this as a kind of systems approach.
Thanks, Mark. That's great, and it'll be really interesting to see how the retrofit study program works out actually. So that'll be really good. I'm going to go on to Lizzie now, and Lizzie's really multitasking here because Lizzie's managing loads of things in the background, is now about to answer some questions as well. So thanks, Lizzie, for doing that. So what do you see the role of our utilities business in helping to support the low carbon transition accessibility?
Yeah, do you know, Mike, that's a great question. And I think Abby touched on earlier the fact that the homes that we live in play a massive part in climate change. And, Mark's just talked about climate anxiety. And I think all of the products and services within the utilities portfolio focus on socially responsible and low carbon living. you know, so you're going to hear from Charlie later, and we partner with Ecology, and we do that to ensure that when our members and our customers are buying our products and services, we're also looking at how we can provide low carbon products, but where we can't, we also try to offset. So we actually have our own Your Co-op forest, and we've got over 11,000 trees planted in that forest, and that is equivalent to about 452 tonnes of carbon reduction. So every time a customer joins us and takes one of our products or services, they're also investing in ensuring that we're working on carbon reduction projects. We also then have a referral scheme. So when our members are happy with our service and they want to recommend us to perhaps one of their friends or family, we also provide vouchers for trees to the person who's referred us and to the person they're referring to. And already that's got 8,200 trees in it just from word of mouth. So for us, it's about making sure that we link all of our products back in any way that we can. From an energy perspective, we have community power. So all of the tariffs that we offer are powered by locally sourced renewable community energy. Those of you more familiar with the energy market will know that really community energy and locally distributed energy sources are going to be one of the ways out of the energy crisis. That's going to be one of the ways we take control of our energy costs. We now partner with very nearly, I was hoping for today to be 200, but very nearly 200 community energy generators. And if you join our community power tariff, you can be assured that that power is linked directly to that renewable energy source. So we've got the low carbon broadband, we've got the community power. We also look at low carbon transport. So not yet available for our members, but really focusing on our colleague members and also other businesses. We provide salary sacrifice electric vehicles. So this really enables everybody to access low carbon transport. So if you can afford it, you can take advantage of an electric car, and you'll get about a 40% saving on the amount you'd normally pay for that by doing that through salary sacrifice. So a great way to support colleagues within businesses to access transport. You know, but let's be really honest, even a cheaper electric car is probably about £300 a month. So it is out of the reach of a number of our colleagues. So we also offer electric bikes, and we're about to launch an electric moped scheme. And then we also offer an opportunity for our colleagues to, if they use public transport perhaps, and they don't need a vehicle, but maybe they could just want to plant some more trees in the forest, and they might want to just join our ecology partnership there. So again, so we've got the broadband, we've got energy, we've got low carbon transport, and we really try and ensure that everything we're doing is really focused around that low carbon, socially responsible lifestyle.
Great, thanks, Lizzie. And I've signed up to the electric car scheme, so I'm excited about that.
Well done, Mark.
Thank you. Perfect bridge into Charlie for introducing ecology. Thanks, Lizzie. So I'm going to come to Charlie in a moment. Final question, Lizzie. What else have we got future plans to make things even more accessible to all in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Mark, you mentioned about making sure that we give everybody a voice and everybody accessibility to do something about climate change. So we've got two really fantastic initiatives. The first one is a project called Powershare, and that is where we are looking to install solar at the moment on the rooftops of our food estate or our nurseries or our travel branches. You know, we've got a huge amount of retail estate, so we're looking to ensure that we can put solar panels on the suitable stores. But instead of benefiting from that as a society to help us with our spiraling energy bills, we're going to offer that out to our members to actually join us and own a proportion of that solar panel. So again, to retrofit your home with solar panels is probably going to cost you anywhere in excess of £6,000, and that's probably quite a small array. If you live in a multi-tenanted business, you can't put solar panels on because you live in a flat and that's not possible. If you rent your home, you're probably not going to be allowed to put solar panels on the roof. So what you can now do is you can buy into some solar panels on our food markets and on our food stores. And this is also accessible from as little as £5 a month. So it really isn't expensive. You can buy in for whatever's affordable, and all of the money that you would save from the generation of those solar panels is paid back to you through your energy bill. So what it really means is anybody that can spare £5 a month has the ability to invest in renewable energy generation and then receive the benefits back and help them manage those spiraling fuel costs. In addition, I mentioned earlier that community energy for me is one of the key ways we're going to get ourselves out of this energy crisis. But there are some real blockers there because the funding that's provided from government has been withdrawn. The hurdle rates for investment are pretty significant, and the interest rates are really off the chart, and they make it really prohibitive for these community energy groups to be able to build new community energy. So our partnership with Octopus Unity is a joint venture, and we have committed to an investment fund there as both parent companies, so Octopus and Mid Counties, and we're actually investing and providing funding to these organisations to enable them to get their projects off the ground. They'll do that, they'll go live, they'll have their members buy in and create the community fund, and at that point they'll pay that money back. So we're going to have a cycling fund to enable us to build more and more community energy and really benefit everybody within the community. So they're two really exciting projects for us.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks, Lizzie. Excellent projects. I'm going to bring in Charlie Adamson now from Ecology. Thanks for joining us, Charlie, and obviously a great link in there from Lizzie and our work with Ecology. So, Charlie, it'd be great if you could provide us an overview of who Ecology are and how you're working with us, the Mid Counties Co-operative.
Sure, and thank you, and hello to everyone this evening. Thanks so much for your time. So Ecology are a climate action platform. We're recently B Corp certified. We achieved that at the end of the last year, which is really exciting for us all. We've set ourselves this crazy mission of trying to reduce 50% of global emissions by 2040. And the way that we're going to achieve that is by working with individuals and also businesses as well to, build in climate action into everyday parts of life, whether that's, the only things that we're doing in our personal life, or also, big business decisions as well. We're currently working with 12,000 businesses, and that ranges from sole traders right up to, big corporate enterprises. I think the beauty of what we're doing is that it doesn't matter whether you're, an artisan, working in your garage, creating something beautiful by yourself, or whether you are a big multinational. Actually, we have products that will work for you and will create, scalable climate action that's relevant for what you're trying to achieve. And in terms of how we're working with Mid Counties Co-op, it's a brilliant partnership that's been running, I think, for just about a year or so. What we've done is we've attributed climate action to a number of their products. So Lizzie mentioned we've got climate positive broadband. We've also got the Fairphone as well, that's got an offer running at the moment for Earth Day, where you'll get 10 extra trees planted in your forest with your name if you take out that deal. So you've got a couple more days to take up that one. But as Lizzie mentioned, this has already generated a huge amount of climate impact. We've got over 11,000 trees planted and 450 tons of carbon, which is a massive amount of impact. And that's just one example of businesses coming together, putting in clever solutions that actually allow the consumer to make great choices, and not only selecting a great product, be that their broadband, ensuring they're getting the great speeds and the great coverage, but also ensuring that they're having a really positive impact on the planet as well.
That's great, Charlie. And are you seeing more businesses starting to engage with yourselves on this type of thing? Are you seeing this growing?
Yes, absolutely. I think consumers on the whole becoming a lot more savvy and a lot more conscious about, where we are investing our own money. So the theme for this Earth Day was invest in our planet. And I think we are certainly seeing that consumers more and more expect the business to take on the responsibility of making sure that, their supply chain is sustainable, and also being clear in their messaging as well. Greenwashing is something that has come up a lot lately. Lots of people have got, there's lots of false information and so forth going around. And I think it's really important for everyone working in this space to play a role in educating, making everyone aware, particularly where there are hidden emissions and things that we don't necessarily think about. So, for example, a digital footprint. We might think that, whilst we're not doing any printing and photocopying anymore, actually sending an email or, Googling something does have a footprint attached to it. And, what's the role that we can play as a business in educating and allowing people to make, great choices and choosing a provider that's going to provide them with some climate impact benefits as well.
And do Ecology have access to a lot of that data and information? Because something often that's quite difficult for individuals and businesses at times is to understand how important, as you say, the digital footprint is, or how important some other areas are, to try and find out the actual impact and data behind that. Are Ecology pretty up to speed and have that data, and can people learn more through Ecology on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we speak to businesses all the time, and one of the biggest barriers for SMEs, so that's small to medium enterprises, is, well, how do I get started in calculating my carbon footprint? This is a subject that's massively complicated. There's some brilliant consultants out there, but actually, you know, they'll charge some pretty hefty fees. So if you are a small business, that you know, at the moment isn't an option for you. So Ecology, we're developing our own tool called Ecology Zero. It's going to be a real-time carbon footprinting tool. And what that's going to do is it's going to plug into the business's accounting software, and it's going to generate calculations based on where the business is spending money. So the crude example is, you know, if you've got £500 going to an airline, it's going to know there's a flight in there. But what that's going to do is it's going to really help businesses identify which areas of their activities are generating the most carbon, with a view to obviously reducing those areas, making reductions in their supply chain, making those changes, and then if we need to, offsetting those little bits as part of that further reduction. But we have a brilliant team working with us. We've got an impact team, and who are the guys that choose the projects that we support, making sure they're verified and they're certified. We also work with an independent panel as well, a climate committee, and they guide our reporting and monitoring. So at every step of the way, we're very much guided by experts and, you know, the people in the field that are looking at all the data and making the best decisions, so that we can then pass that information on and share that with our community.
Great, thanks, Charlie. That's a really good insight on Ecology and the great work that you're doing. Are there, over to any questions from anybody else, if anyone wants to ask any questions at all to the speakers on obviously the topics we've been talking about. Lizzie, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat at the moment.
No, not yet.
Okay,
But we've got
okay.
one hand up now, Mike.
Thank you. Yes, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Just listening to you, Charlie, I was wondering, this tool for calculating the carbon footprint, are you working at all with the Federation of Small Businesses? Because it's something that they could perhaps offer to their members, which would get it out to, and also awareness really with the SMEs that they work with.
We're not currently, at the moment, that I'm aware of. I'm not directly involved in that project. It's still in the beta phase, so we are testing later this year. But there's going to be our CEO Elliot Code posted quite a long update on LinkedIn. So do go and have a check out of that video, because it's includes all sorts of roadmaps. But there's also an overview on the pricing. So this is going to be available to anyone that's within our community. So any small businesses can come in and use this as a tool once it goes live.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at all from anybody on the call? Okay. I'm going to sum up in a moment, but I'm also going to give the speakers a slight heads up of one final question I'm going to ask for everyone. And you are allowed to pass if you want the speakers on this one, but it's entirely up to you because you've shared so much insight already. But what I was going to ask you was, if you had to give one last tip to everyone on this call on what we could all do to live sustainably and or support low carbon transition, what would that tip be? It's the one tip to finish off with. Like I say, I've been a speaker before and been put on the spot with this. It's not always easy, so you are welcome to say pass if you want to, and that's fine. But before I do that, I'm just going to sum up and thank everybody for your involvement today, and especially thank the speakers. I attended an event recently, actually, which Chris Packham was presenting at, and it had various people who involved in the environment world, in the world of sustainability. And he said that often when you have these types of things, you do end up feeling optimistic, and rather than being pessimistic. You know, these types of gatherings, you see the real good work that's going on out there, and you do leave feeling as if you could do something different. And his advice to everybody was to get up the next day 15 minutes earlier than you normally would, to do something different that's going to be great for the world. And it could be something you've been putting off for ages. He said, set your alarm 15 minutes early and just do something different. So that was his, and I've stolen his. So sorry about that, Chris. But over to the speakers for your final top tip to everybody as we finish off. So I'll go to Abby first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Mike. Yeah, it's maybe a bit of a cheat because it kind of links back to what I was saying before. But I think just try a bit of everything. See what works for you, and whether that's linked to like food or travel or energy, and just see what sticks. And I think just try and be kind to yourself. If one of the things doesn't really work for you, just give another approach a go, because I think everyone's got their own things that work best. And maybe an easy thing to start with is we all probably go to supermarkets, so just thinking about what's one switch we could make while doing the weekly food shop, just something to experiment with, linked to what I was saying earlier about meat. I think that would be a good way to start.
Thanks, Abby. And Chris? Sorry, Chris, I think you're trying to unmute, aren't you? I think I can see. I'll tell you what, that's how you've done it.
I'm here. Yes, sorry. I go with the try a bit of everything, but I'm split, and I'm going to cheat here as well by saying, firstly, if you've got any spare time at all, get involved locally. Work with your neighbours, with people who are doing, whether it's practical stuff like tree planting or looking after nature, or actual climate campaigning. People everywhere are doing it. And part of that climate campaigning, quite simply, make sure your MP knows that you understand there's a climate crisis and that you want them to do more about it. Don't run away from a political bit just because we don't trust politicians. If we don't keep pushing them, we can't guarantee other people will.
Right, thanks, Chris. And to Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think mine would be, as someone and as part of a group working primarily outside of this space, I would say, get involved and consider what you have to bring to the table. There are levers and things that aspire that we could kind of bring to this conversation that we never would have considered before. So I would say, reconsider what you can bring to this conversation, and that everyone has to play a part. So that kind of systems approach is what I'd repeat. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks, Mark. And Lizzie.
Yeah, mine's a little bit similar to Abby's actually, but I think it's about making ethical buying decisions. So don't just go for the product or the service that is the one you've always used. Maybe do a little bit of research and make sure that you're buying a product or a service from an ethical organisation that's in, from the pensions point that I think Abby mentioned as well. I'm definitely going to have to look at that. Make sure you're making conscious buying decisions and work with organisations that support, climate reduction.
Thanks, Lizzie. That's great. And finally to Charlie.
I'm very much going to echo Lizzie's thoughts, actually. I was going to say, be a savvy shopper. I think that's the best thing to do, is really make a conscious decision of where you are as a consumer investing your money. Have a look at the, what is that company doing? What is the business doing? And also, really have a look at who are the local businesses in your area. Actually, what we're seeing at Ecology is that if you have a look at our business tree planting leaderboard today, I think 6 out of 10 of the top businesses they're all SMEs. They're all local businesses who've just decided to make climate action a priority. So that would be my top tip.
Well, thanks all. I mean, considering I put you on the spot with that top tip, all of you, they were brilliant, and I'm glad we've recorded it because we've got it. So thanks ever so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to speakers. Thanks for everyone attending. And hopefully I'll see you all at our AGM on the 14th of May. So see you all soon, and thanks for your involvement. Bye all.